Right. Perfect. Okay, so I think we're ready to get going. I just want to get a confirmation that you are able to see my screen that says applying for Drug-Free Community Support Program, Office of National Drug Control Policy. Can you all see that on the screen?
I can see it, Rob.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's get going. Um, this is the second in our series of helping community coalitions around the state of Utah prepare and get ready for and make sure they've got everything and all their ducks in a row to apply for the Drug-Free Community Support Program grant. With that said, I do kind of want to offer a little disclaimer in the beginning here. Um, the information that we are providing comes off of past years' RFAs or FOAs, and I'll show you in just a minute a screen that is going to help you with all of the acronyms that I'm going to use. But essentially, all the releases of the application request in the past, that is the information that we will be using. So the caveat is that there will be a new release coming up in January. And from year to year, there are a couple of things that change, or at least from past releases of the FOA itself, there has been from time to time some changes in some of the documents required, some of the language that's used, certainly some of the questions that are asked for the applicant to respond to, and kind of some technical changes. So I will say the information again that we're presenting today is based upon past releases. We will update any pertinent information that we are aware of when the new release comes out. I also want to add, though, that if you are applying as a community coalition, you are responsible solely, you are responsible for making sure that your application is 100% complete. If by chance we make a mistake and leave something off of our presentations and from our instructions, we claim no responsibility if then your application is determined ineligible. So again, I just want to make sure that you understand that you are completely responsible in making sure that you've got every single element that the new FOA will require as you submit your applications. With that said, I'll go ahead and kind of proceed. Um, so again, this is the second of a series that we've put together on applying for the DFC grant. Today we're going to talk about some of the things that you'll need in order to be eligible to apply. We're going to talk about the 12 sectors. We're also going to talk about how to register and make sure that you've got everything set for an online application to grants.gov for this specific grant application. We'll also talk about some of the items that you'll need to be preparing now and all the way up into your submittal, which will come prior to, very much prior to the due date. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So we've shown you this before in our first training session. I am horrible at using letters and acronyms, and if I do, I apologize, but I will refer you back to this page of alphabet soup. When I start talking, if there is something that you don't understand and need me to slow down because I've used a whole bunch of letters in a row that you don't that you aren't following, just let me know and I'll slow down and make sure that we cover and make sure everybody knows and understands what I'm actually talking about if I throw out an acronym like FOA, which is a funding opportunity announcement. Okay? So with that, We'll go on. Really briefly, we gave some information on the DFC program in our first webinar, and I'll refer you back to that. If you are using this webinar series and the links that we've provided for trainings in the next couple of weeks, please refer back to the first webinar for more information on the DFC program itself, including what it is, where it came from, and what it can do potentially for your community. Same thing with this. This is an opportunity for up to $125,000 per year with this grant. Again, more information is contained in the first webinar. But what I really want to get into is talking about some of the eligibility requirements. Now, I've made this as exciting as possible to go through for the next little bit, but it is a lot of information, and if you do miss something, it's okay. We are recording this, and you can go back and watch it again later. First thing I do want to talk about is on our list of things that you'll need to be eligible for the DFC grant is you need to be a community coalition, and you need to be a community coalition that's been in existence for at least 6 months. So how you prove that is in the application itself, you will be asked to provide 2 samples of meeting minutes that cover the course of at least 6 months. And they'll need to be in the time period of last year's release date. So anywhere of March 2016, 6-month period, to March of 2017, when the applications for this year will be due. So that 1-year period, you need to have been in existence as a coalition for at least 6 months. The cool thing is you will be required to have 12 sectors represented for your application itself. They make it a little bit easy though. The past 6 months, the 2 minutes that they are requesting, or the 2 samples of meeting minutes that they're requesting, they don't necessarily need you to have all 12 sectors listed in those meeting minutes. However, all members that are at those meetings, you need to align them with the sector that they are from. So if you've got meeting minutes from, let's say, May of this past year, but you don't have all 12 sectors represented in that meeting, that's okay. You'll take the members that were there at that meeting in May, you'll align them with the sector that they do come from, and you'll note that in your meeting minutes. If you need to amend your meeting minutes to include the sector, you can do that actually by hand and then scan in the required samples of the meeting minutes. Or you can, if you do have the ability, you can go in and, for example, for a Word document, you can update it that way. But they will allow you to do it by hand. You just need to have all of the members that were there present at your meeting, they need to be aligned with the sector that they come from. We're going to talk more about the sectors, and we're going to talk more about the meeting minutes in a little while. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the 12 sector representation. So the DFC program calls for community-wide collaboration, and they do that in calling for these 12 sectors. And I've got this little puzzle thing here to help you remember that these 12 sectors are actually part of your community, and they are what makes up the puzzle for your community, what makes your community great. Those 12 sectors really quickly are parents, youth, business, schools, law enforcement, religious or fraternal organizations, health professionals, health clinics or doctors, volunteer or civic organizations. These are oftentimes kind of your Lions Club or Kiwanis Club, those types of organizations. Youth serving organizations. These are often nonprofits in your communities, and I'll throw out like Boys and Girls Clubs. Those are youth serving organizations. Media, print media, over-the-air media, any type of media. Government, this is local, state, county, LSAA would be applicable. In fact, there's a note in the FOA itself that if your state has a system wherein someone from your state office of substance abuse can be a part of your coalition, then go ahead and do that. That is a very appropriate thing. And then the last sector is an other substance abuse organization. This could potentially be a treatment and recovery organization. This could be another coalition. Maybe there's a coalition outside of your area, but still close enough to be able to be in partnership with. That can count as a sector representative for other substance abuse organizations. Now, again, to be clear, you will need to have a named sector representative of all of these 12 sectors in your DFC application itself. And again, more will be discussed later on in our webinar today. The next thing that I want to talk about is mission statement. It's required of the DFC program applicants to have a mission statement, and that mission statement must include the reduction of youth substance abuse. So, mission statements. Again, I want to make it very, very clear that your mission statement needs to include at minimum, reduction of substance abuse within the youth population in your community. So I've got down here at the bottom, it needs to have the phrase or an idea or intent similar to the reduction of youth substance abuse. So I've got a little exercise here for us. We're going to talk about some examples of a mission statement. The first one, is it a good or bad mission statement? Now again, this may be an awesome mission statement, but does it meet the requirements? So to empower the youth in our community to find their greatest success and see all of their dreams come true. Now that's an amazing mission statement. However, it does not meet the requirements for the DFC application itself. It does not contain the phrase, idea, or intent of substance use reduction among youth. The bottom one I put up here, many of you know I worked with the South Salt Lake Coalition, and they were a successful DFC coalition and received the full 10 years of DFC funding. This was the mission statement for the South Salt Lake Coalition: to promote safe and healthy youth and communities in South Salt Lake through the prevention of substance abuse and violence. Right there you see we've got youth and we've got a focus on prevention of substance abuse and violence. Many community coalitions will have a mission statement that is grandiose and awesome. They may have done some exercises even within the CTC training, and still fall a little bit short of the requirements for the DFC application. Again, I want to make sure that the point is hit. Your mission statement needs to have a reduction of substance abuse among youth as one of its primary focuses. Moving on, the next thing we'll talk about is, and in fact, we're not going to talk about it. Your application must have a 12-month action plan. We will, however, talk about this in session 3 of our webinar series coming up on December 15th. We're going to talk about the narrative and action plan. Much more will be discussed, and just to get in your head, and many of you know already that it is a requirement to have a 12-month action plan, and a lot of the DFC application itself is focused around that 12-month action plan and certainly the narrative. How do you tie in the things that you are proposing to do into the needs of your community? Again, much more will be discussed in our upcoming series on December 15th. The next thing is you will need to participate in the Drug-Free Community's national evaluation, meaning that your community needs to be able to access your SHARP for your community and then report it back to the DFC program itself. So if you are a community that currently does not have access to SHARP for your community, that's one of the things that you'll need to start working on now, to make sure that you've got the ability to pull sharp specific to your community. I'm not going to tell you how to define your community, if it's a full school district, if it is a high school cone, or if it's just several elementaries that then feed into a junior high. However it is, you'll need information that will dial down to your community for purposes of the DFC National Evaluation. The great thing about the SHARP here in the state of Utah is that it has the requirements built in. The DFC program requires that we evaluate to these 4 core measures. First, past 30-day use of marijuana, alcohol, and prescription drugs. The second is perception of risk or harm of use of those above drugs. And then perception of parental disapproval of use and peer disapproval of use. Again, the SHARP tool already monitors to these core measures. If for some reason you and your community don't have access to SHARP and you'll be using another tool, you'll need to submit that tool to the National Evaluation folks, but it still must contain measurements of these 4 core measures. We can further talk about that once the FOA is released, if there's any changes to that. These have been the same for 10 years, and so I don't think there is going to be a change. The next thing we'll talk about is actual eligibility to receive federal funding. And I put up a couple of eligible organizations that we in the state of Utah are familiar with, and these are some of what would certainly be eligible to apply on behalf of a coalition or maybe a coalition itself. And so that includes our local substance abuse authority system. They would be eligible to apply on behalf of a coalition or for themselves. A health department, school district, any police departments eligible to apply. Most times police departments will apply, and then because they are city entities or county entities, they'll have relationships that will be noted in the application itself with the county agency or city government that they are associated with. Institutions of higher learning are also able to apply, so any universities or colleges that you may have in your communities. Other nonprofit organizations eligible to receive federal funding. So any nonprofit that has been deemed eligible by the federal government, by the IRS, to receive federal funding is able to apply. The next thing I wanted to highlight is a community coalition that doesn't necessarily itself as a coalition have nonprofit status can apply for DFC if they have an agreement with an entity that is eligible to apply. So that may mean you hooking up with a nonprofit organization in your area that has a similar vision and mission, but you as a coalition can apply underneath their nonprofit status. The same thing with a police department. So if you as a coalition or an organization, you can meet under the police department's eligibility for federal funding and apply for the DFC grant that way. The next thing really quickly we'll talk about, because again we'll talk more about this in an upcoming series, is the match requirement for the DFC program. I've got on this slide, it's not hard to come up with a match. In fact, it's kind of fun. You will be applying for up to $125,000 of federal funding. Now, at this point, I'll also say you will not receive a greater score if you apply for less than $125,000. Therefore, it makes no sense to apply for less than $125,000 a year. Again, you're not scored any different. It doesn't make any sense to just apply for 100 or 50 or whatever. But with that, you then have to come up with the exact match of that federal funding in non-federal sources. We'll talk more about this in January on the 19th with session 4, but really quickly, I will say, as you're thinking about some of the great things that are going on in your communities, it is likely that you'll be able to use the funding associated with those amazing things that are going on in your communities, as long as they don't come from a federal source. So really quickly, a quick example is Partnerships for Success money is federal. So you cannot count Partnerships for Success money in your non-federal match. However, if your community is doing anything with Parents Empowered, Parents Empowered is state funded from alcohol sales from the DABC, and anything in your community that you are using with Parents Empowered can count as non-federal match. And you're quickly able to get to that $125,000 using campaigns like Parents Empowered, Use Only as Directed, as well as other things that are coming out of your communities. It is not hard. We'll talk way more about it on January 19th. Zip code overlap. If you are a community coalition that covers multiple zip codes, you will name all of those zip codes in your DFC application. If you share a zip code with another organization, another coalition that's applying, you must have a letter of mutual cooperation, meaning that you are very much aware that they are a coalition and they have DFC funding or will be applying for DFC funding, and you will be applying for DFC funding, and you will share resources, you'll operate, you'll work together in reducing substance abuse among the youth that are in your shared community. The next one, really simple. If you have a federal, or if you have an agency that is eligible to apply for federal grants, they can only have DFC funding for one grant at a time, so one coalition at a time. So a quick example would be like our friends in Utah County that have multiple coalitions in their area. Utah County could potentially apply for one of those coalitions, and if they got the grant, they wouldn't be able to apply for any other coalition. Only one DFC grant at a time. However, an agency, if they've had a DFC grant for, let's say, 10 years, and as long as they're working with a new coalition in a new area, they can apply for DFC funding again for that new coalition. However, each coalition is only eligible to receive 10 years total of funding. So if you're a DFC that's been around for 9 years, you've got one more year, and even if you move to a different fiscal agent, you are no longer eligible after that 10th year. Okay, so let's get into some of the things on how to apply. There's a lot of steps. We'll cover some of them, but we'll also make sure that we hit on some of these in our upcoming webinars as well. So the DFC application is an exclusive online application. It is the only way that you can apply. In order to be able to apply, you must be registered with grants.gov. And in order to be able to register with grants.gov, you have to have an employee identification number, a DUNS number, and a SAM registration. Let's talk about what those are. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to hit this again, but start this process now. The process of making sure that you can physically upload your application by the due date. Don't wait around. Make sure you start this process now. So a couple of things. You may come from an agency that may already be registered. If you've got a federal grant and you know that you've got a federal grant, or the agency that you are applying under has a federal grant, they already have all of this stuff. And that's awesome. But don't let anybody off the hook at this point. If you know that someone from your organization has already applied for and has received a federal grant, that's amazing. Make sure that all of your registrations are up to date. That includes your DUNS number, and your SAM registration. I put down here, don't take someone's word for it. So if you've got a grant officer or an office administrator that's responsible for things like this, and you email them and say, hey, just want to make sure we're registered and everything's okay for us to submit a grant. And if they send back a reply that says, yep, don't just take their word for it. Ask to see the registrations and the dates, because oftentimes, and I'm aware of several cases where this has happened, you think that everything's cool, and then you go to upload your grant, and you've got 2 days left to upload your grant, and your DUNS registration is expired. If your DUNS registration is expired and you've only got a day to upload your grant, you are not going to be able to upload your grant. It takes about a 72-hour turnaround for activating your registrations. So again, don't take somebody's word for it. Make sure you actually see the application dates and expiration dates. So really quickly, we'll talk about first the employee identification number. Every agency or business has an employee identification number. It's often called a tax ID number. If you are a new coalition or a new organization, you need to apply to the IRS to receive an employee identification number. You then also have to register with the state, the Division of Corporations and Commercial Code, as a business. And then I want to be very clear on this. You as a coalition or an agency that you are applying with must already have a determination from the IRS in order to be able to apply. So for example, a 501c3. That process can take anywhere from 2 months to 6 or 8 months. So if you're thinking, hey, we just started as a coalition and we want to apply as an independent organization and we're going to go through the application for nonprofit or tax exempt status, I'm just going to say it's probably too late at this point. Think about next year. And coincidentally, if any time within you having successfully received a DFC grant, if your coalition moves to its own 501c3, you can port the grant to that new 501c3 organization, and your grants management official will help you on how to do that. Okay, so check with your business official for your EIN. You will need your EIN to complete all the other steps in applying and making sure you've got a grants.gov account. So the second thing then we'll talk about, once you've got your EIN, you know your EIN, you've got it from your business official, you will apply for a DUNS number. A DUNS number that comes from a company called Dun & Bradstreet. It stands for Data Universal Numbering System. This is a way for businesses to be able to open up credit lines on their own without having to be attached to a person with a Social Security number. So you need a DUNS number essentially to be able to operate and conduct business in the United States. So you will need an official from your agency, so an officer, an executive director, however you call that, someone that is in an official capacity for your organization to apply for a DUNS number, or you can do all the work as long as you have their permission to do so. So to register for a DUNS number, you'll need a legal name of your organization, you'll need the address of your headquarters, as well as any addresses that you do business at or any other name that you do business under, the physical address of those businesses, mailing addresses, telephone number, and then contact name and title. Again, this is the official representative from your organization having given you permission to do that. And then you'll need the number of employees at your location. You can get an expedited DUNS number if you are applying for federal funding. And I've included the link here. If this applies to you and you are needing a DUNS number, use this link, write this down, or use it later as we send off your ability to access this presentation itself. you can get an expedited DUNS number this way. For all intents and purposes, is the easiest way for if you are applying for a federal grant. Use this link anyway, even if you don't need it to be expedited. Okay, so I'm going to move on to SAM. You will need to create an account for the System for Award Management. This is how the federal government gives out money to businesses and other smaller governmental agencies throughout the rest of the nation. So in order to do this, you need to go to www.sam.gov and create a login. That's the first step in the process of creating an account or creating a registration in the SAM system. Is you as a person, Joe Schmo, go to this website and create an account. Then, once you have an account, you will then complete a SAM registration. Again, you'll need to use, for the registration purposes, the name of an official in your agency, or you can do it if you have the permission to do that. Sorry, so someone in your organization needs to do it, or if you've got permission, you can do it for them. So, in order to create or to register for SAM, you'll need an account. Once you've got an account, you'll need your DUNS number, and then some of the following things. Depending upon what type of organization, and as you are in the SAM system itself, some of these things will pop up and it won't be foreign to you. You'll be able to say, yes, I need to complete that. No, I don't need to complete that. But CAGE and NCAGE codes are basically codes used to do business with the federal government. If you are receiving funds or shipping things out of the country or whatever, you'll need those codes. A lot of this doesn't apply, but may. You'll also need your federal acquisition regulation responses. These are questions in a form that you'll need to answer and respond to. Oftentimes, these aren't applicable, but they may be with your organization itself. The next thing you'll need to input into SAM is financial information, including executive compensation. Once you've got all of those things, you are then able to register for a SAM. I keep saying account, but it's not right. A SAM. You'll have a SAM registration. Then, once you've got an EIN, a DUNS number, and registered with the SAM system, you can go to grants.gov and be able to open an account to upload your application. There's a couple steps that have to happen prior to. So as you create your own personal account within the grants.gov system, you will then enter your EIN and DUNS number. Those things will be aligned with your organization if your organization has used grants.gov to apply for federal funding in the past. If that is the case, you will then ask for permission within your agency of your grants.gov point of contact or eBiz person for approval to have your own account to then be able to upload the grant itself. Or if you've got a grant officer in your organization that does this, then you won't necessarily need to create your own account, but just make sure with your grants.gov officer, again, that all of your registrations are current, that nothing has expired, and that you are able to use grants.gov seamlessly. I hope not to have caused any confusion there. But you'll need all those things in order to be able to enter into grants.gov and then ultimately upload your application. So in grants.gov, once everything's set and you're ready to upload your application, you will need a couple of things. You'll need the FOA number, that is the funding number for the grant itself, and then you'll need the catalog of federal domestic assistance number. Both of these things are found on the front page of the grant release itself, or the FOA itself, and then just a date on here. The grant should be released around the second week of January of 2017. Okay, so kind of just the things that you will upload once you have everything set and are ready to upload. You will upload in 4 different files. We'll talk more about this in our upcoming webinars, but really quickly, you'll upload it in 4 different files. Table of contents, that'll include your project narrative and community overview. You'll upload the budget narrative separately, and then you'll upload attachments separately as well, and they're grouped into two uploads itself. Okay, if you need any help with uploading or with getting registrations or whatever, don't call me, don't email me, email or call the people at grants.gov. They will be able to help you with any of your needs. You can email them at support@grants.gov or by phone. Give them a call. They will be able to help. Don't call them on Christmas. They won't answer, but they are awesome. I've called them before. I've used their help. They are tremendously able to help out, and they were super, super friendly and great. With that, I am going to turn the time over to Logan, and he will finish up.
Thanks, Rob. I just a couple of things that I wanted to mention or add on. So the first one is that I hope this is beneficial to those of you who are on this call. I hope that you realize how nice it is to have someone go through all of this. I know that Rob just went through a lot of stuff. The first time that I applied for this grant, I didn't have somebody like Rob to go through all of these things. I had to figure out what the DUNS number was on my own, and I was one of those, like Rob was talking about, that didn't find out until the day of submission that our DUNS number was not updated. So we weren't able to apply that year because we didn't meet the requirements. But it's just really nice to have somebody go through all of these things. And that brought me to the second thing I wanted to mention, which is if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with all of this information that's just been thrown at you, and I'm about to throw a whole bunch more, that's okay. Don't worry about it too much. There's a reason that we're recording these. We're going to have the recording up online later today. We'll also have a copy of this PowerPoint, so you can go back and refer to all of these things. That's why we've tried to make these slides full of details, so when you come back, it's easy for you to pick up on the information. All of those links that we've talked about will be available. So don't let the sense of overwhelming deter you at this point, because we still have plenty of time to prepare for this, and you'll have lots of time to come back and review these things. So the next things that we wanted to talk about are some of these items that are necessary when you actually submit your application. So I'm going to go through these fairly quick. If you have any questions about any of these items, don't hesitate to stop us and ask the questions. The first one that I wanted to talk about was the sector member table. So as Rob has already described to us, we have to have 12 sectors. Those 12 sectors that he mentioned have to be represented on our coalition. And one of the ways that we prove that we really do have those 12 sectors represented is by having this table, showing this table. So it shows that you have a person on your coalition representing each of those 12 sectors. You have to list their name. You have to list the organization that they work for, the role that they represent on the coalition, what they do for the coalition. So you can see that on this example that I provided here, I listed which subcommittee the individual is on our coalition, but you could give more specifics than I did here. The point is to demonstrate that they're involved in some way and that they're helping your coalition. You don't have to include everyone in your coalition on the sector member table. You can, but you don't have to. They specify on the grant that it will not help nor hurt you to list everyone, so it's up to you. But the key is to make sure that you do include, at the very least, those 12 sector reps. and those 12 need to stand out. So if you do decide to list more than just the 12, I recommend somehow highlighting those 12 designated sector reps. In fact, in a lot of ways, I think that it's easier to just do the 12 so that you make sure that those 12 positions are highlighted and you're not overwhelming the reviewers with 7 law enforcement representatives and 2 business representatives. Just have one of each, your assigned representative, and make sure that you acknowledge what they're doing on the coalition. Note that it's also important to provide the name of the individual that demonstrates the greatest likelihood of levering resources. So you see that quote that I added over there to the side. That's a direct quote from last year's FOA. They want to make sure that you're showing who the most powerful individuals on the coalition are, maybe is one way to look at it. So let's say that you have a school teacher representing your school sector. If that's who you have, that's great, and that will satisfy the requirements of the grant. But if you also have the superintendent on your coalition, you're better off listing her as your school rep because she can leverage more resources, and the reviewers look for things like that. You can see that on this example I gave here, I have a parent listed, which is great. That satisfies the requirements of the grant, and at the time, that's what I had for the parent sector. But if I would have had the district PTA rep, I would have wanted to list them because they might have more access to parents. So think about that when you're deciding who your sector reps are going to be. Also note, even though I didn't do it on this example, for your youth representative, they have to be 18 years old or younger, and you need to list their age next to their name. So the year that I applied for the grant, they didn't require that, but last year's FOA, they did. So you're going to have to make sure that you list their age next to their name. The next thing that you have to have, and Rob talked about this just briefly, is that you have to have a CIA or an MOU for each sector member listed on that table. So you need one for each of those 12, and you can't have more than that. You can't have more than those 12. So, and it doesn't have to be a CIA, it doesn't have to be an MOU, it can be one or the other. Basically, you have to have a document that somehow shows the responsibility of both parties. One party being the coalition itself, the other party being the person or agency representing the sector identified. And you can use whatever template or format you want. It doesn't have to look any specific way, but there are certain things that are required on that. First of all, you can only include a CIA for each of the 12 sector reps. If you have more than 12 CIAs in your application, it will hurt you. They will score you down for that. The agreements also need to be recent. They have to be hand signed. They have to include the member's name, their organization, and what the responsibilities of each party are. So just as an example, this is the template that they provide for you in the grant application. So they actually say if you don't have a CIA or an MOU, you can use this format, but they specify that you don't have to. This is just an example that they provide. What you do have to include is the sector, the member name, the organization name, if applicable, and the start and end date of the contract. And then you should list what the responsibilities of each party are. So, for example, this is the MOU that we use for the UPCA. And I only included the top half of the MOU, but you can just see this is the format we use. We have the name of the coalition and then the name of the member who is joining. We have the date that the contract covers. So in this particular example, it's showing January 2015 to December 2016. But the most important part is that you then have responsibilities listed. So, for example, maybe you say that the coalition is going to provide certain things. Like in this example, we say we'll provide an organizational structure, we'll provide bylaws, we'll create a contact list, we'll have resources for coalitions to use. It's just saying this is what the coalition itself is going to do. And then the next part, the number 2 part of this would be what the individual member is going to provide for the coalition. And it's important that you try not to use the same thing for every one of those 12 sector reps. Try to have a specific contract just for them. So, for example, find things that they can contribute to the coalition individually. So it really shows how you're getting all of these resources from different areas of the community. Let's say that your police department helps the coalition with a prescription drug take-back event. So specify that in the MOU. Write in that that's one of the things that they're going to do, that they're going to supply X number of officers for so many hours to help with that prescription drug take-back event twice a year. I know that I think Teresa's on our line right now. I was looking at her MOU that she has with her law enforcement representative, and she actually wrote in there specifically that that law enforcement rep will be the one to register the coalition with the DEA to do a take-back event. So she has very specific items that that coalition member is going to contribute to the coalition, and that's good. Those are the things that reviewers are looking for. They want to see that you have an individualized contract with each of those members or agencies that are on the coalition. But again, just as a reminder, whatever format you use, make sure that it's not older than the 12 months. It has to be hand signed and dated by each of the members. You can't have a paid staff be a sector member. So let's say you're working with a local substance abuse authority and you have a prevention specialist who's a paid staff who's going to be helping with the coalition. They can't be one of the sector member reps. You need to have community volunteers or members from other agencies that are fulfilling those roles. You must include their name, organization if they represent one. So, for example, if you have a student, list what school she comes from. And then, like I said, show the responsibilities for each party. All right, the next one that we wanted to talk about are meeting minutes. Rob covered this briefly, but just a review, you have to choose meeting minutes that show that you have your community engaged, that you have identified clear goals, and that your meetings are centered around accomplishing those goals. You're trying to find minutes that show that you are effectively addressing the issues in your community. If you have, for example, meeting minutes where it's just these different community agencies sharing what's happening in their agency, that's not going to be something that's going to highlight your coalition. You need to have minutes that show that you are working on substance abuse prevention projects in the community. I also recommend adding specific details to those minutes. Sometimes we write our minutes with the understanding that everyone reading them is familiar with the community, they're familiar with the project that you're working on, but you have to remember that a stranger is going to be reading these minutes. So you might need to clarify certain things on those, like acronyms. I'll give you a specific example. I was looking through some meeting minutes from our Washington County Coalition to decide which ones to use. And we had one that was a really good example of the coalition engaging all of these different sectors of the community and working on a project, but we had only given enough detail to get the message across to people who were very involved with the coalition and they knew what was happening. To a stranger, they may have missed out on some important information. So one of the lines was, a decision was made to extend the prescription drug take-back event to Enterprise. And that was the end of that sentence. And to a stranger not from this community, that doesn't give them some really important information. So we went back and we amended it to illustrate a little bit better what the actual conversation was in the coalition. So I added in, a decision was made to extend the prescription drug take-back event to Enterprise, which is a small community 45 minutes north of St. George. This will make it easier for residents of that community to participate without having to travel long distances. The Sheriff's Department has agreed to partner with the coalition to provide law enforcement at that location for the event. The example is just that these are all decisions that were made in the meeting, but it wasn't necessarily reflected in the minutes. and you want it to be. You want all of those details in there so that a stranger reviewing them will really understand how the meetings are actually going. So keep that in mind when you're choosing meeting minutes to use for this application. So these next things, I'm gonna go through them pretty quickly, but we just wanted to give you kind of an idea of some of the certifications and assurances that you have to apply for this grant. This image that I put up here, this is just a screenshot of the actual online application that Rob mentioned. Some of these things you just have to check a box and put a date showing that your agency, the fiscal agency that's applying for this grant, has completed some of these assurances. So they have to fill out these forms and send them into the federal government, and then you have to list the date that they did that, showing that the agency does have them. A full list of these certifications and assurances can be found at this website that I've listed on here. So you can go there and look at all of those and work your way through to make sure that the agencies have them. But I wanted to just walk through the majority of them really quickly. One of the first ones is an assurance of legal eligibility, showing that the organization that is applying, is legally eligible to apply. So if the coalition is its own fiscal agent, maybe your coalition is a 501c3, and so you're applying for the money to come, you would fill out this Appendix E. If, though, you are having another agency be your fiscal agent, then you would fill out Appendix F. And this is, again, just showing you a screenshot. These are found in the FOA. So when the application actually comes out, it'll have all of these assurances, all of the appendix in there. But this is a screenshot from last year's FOA. And you can just see it's pretty simple to go through and fill these out and sign them and make sure that you have them in. That second option, if you're not your own fiscal agent, if there's another agency that's going to accept this grant funding for you, then you have to fill out basically an MOU, a memorandum of understanding that shows that the coalition's going to do what it says and that the fiscal agent will house the money to help them to do that. The next assurance is one that you're stating that you're only going to have one DFC grant at a time. So the coalition is not trying to apply for two different DFC grants during a same time period. So you have to sign this document saying that you're only applying for the one grant. So for example, you can't apply for a DFC mentor grant and a DFC grant at the same time. It has to be one or the other. Appendix H is an assurance of 10-year funding limit. So you have to sign this document saying that you're not applying for more than 10 years. So if your community has already had 10 years of DFC funding, you're not eligible to apply for more. So you have to sign this document saying that you're not applying for more than the 10 years. This is another one that was in last year. I assume it'll be in this again this year, that says that you cannot spend these funds on construction programs. So for example, you can't say we're going to use these funds to build a building where we'll hold after school programs. You could use the funding to run the after school program, but you can't use it to build a building. You can't use it for construction purposes. They also had this one last year. This is a charitable choice document. It's basically signing saying that you will comply with SAMHSA's provisions on religious organizations providing substance abuse services without impairing their religious character. You can read the whole document if you'd like, but it's just another one of those documents that you have to sign and include with your application. One other thing that you have to do for this, I just pulled it, again, this is a screenshot from last year's application, but this is a letter to the single state agency. That's what they refer to it as. Basically, what this is in order to apply for the DFC grant, you have to let our state Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services know that you're going to apply for it. That's the reason for them including this. They want to make sure that coalitions are working with their state and that they've let them know that they're doing prevention services and that they're applying for a grant. So you need to write a letter. It can be very simple. It basically will say, we are this coalition and we're applying for a DFC grant for this time period, and you're going to send that to our State Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, just notifying them that you're going to apply for the grant. You'll also notice that last bullet point on there says that if you get the grant, you have to notify them within 30 days that you have received the award. And again, I think the purpose here is they're just trying to make sure that we're working closely with the prevention professionals in our state as we're providing services in our communities. This is another one of those certifications that you have to check a box saying that you have agreed to this, and it basically states that you will not use DFC money for lobbying, and if your coalition does lobby, if they have other funds that allow them to lobby, you have to disclose that in this letter. You have to let them know what those funds are and how they're being used. So this is one of the reasons why, especially for most coalitions, but especially those that have DFC grants, we stress the importance of making sure that you're doing advocacy work versus lobbying, because you can get into some trouble with that. But that's what this certification is. You check a box saying that you're not going to use the money to lobby and that you're not spending over their allotted amount on lobbying from other funding sources either. All right, I think this is the last one that I have in here. This is, they call this the HHS 690 form. It basically is just saying that you're going to abide by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it says you're not going to discriminate against anybody. If you bring in volunteers, if you're hiring people to work on the grant, that you're not going to discriminate. So you have to sign this assurance. Your agency has to send that into the government, agreeing to abide by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You can find a copy of that form. What you're seeing here is a screenshot of the top of it, but the entire form can be found on that site that I've included there, and that will also be included in the FOA when they send it out. So the last thing that I'm going to talk about here are some of the key personnel documents that you have to include in this grant. So you have to have a resume for a minimum of 2 people. You have to have a resume for the project director of the grant and the project coordinator. You also have to have a job description for what those individuals are going to do. So you have to create just a brief description of their job, and then you need to have a resume for each of the people who will take that job. Also, if there's going to be any other key paid staff or in-kind staff, like if you're using staff from your local substance abuse authority to come up with match funds, you have to have resumes for them as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the future, but I just wanted to throw that in there. Make sure that you understand that you will have to have resumes for the paid staff and a job description for those positions. All right, so I think we're done for today. Again, I know that we've given you a lot of information, but our goal here is to try to break this down into some sections so you're not waiting. I mean, typically what we do is we wait for the FOA to come out, and then we have 2 months to try to throw all of this stuff together. So our hope is that by reviewing some of these things, you could start working on this stuff right now. So we're actually, later today, we're going to post a checklist of all of those things that we've talked about today so that you could start working on them right now. You can start putting together your sector member table. You can start gathering your CIAs and your MOUs and getting all of those together right now. You can start filling out these assurances and certifications. You can get your DUNS number updated and register with SAM. So we're going to have that checklist so that you can start working on those right now. And what we would encourage you to do is that if you want to apply for this grant in 2017, try to get all of those things that we've talked about today done before our next meeting. So on December 15th, when we meet, you'll have all of those things taken care of, and you can just start to focus in on your narrative and action plan. And then we'll give you a goal to get that narrative and action plan done before the next meeting. And then we'll just start working on the budget. So this will kind of break things down and hopefully simplify some of these tasks that we're talking about. So like I said, we're going to put that on our website later today. So there'll be this recording of this session. We'll have a copy of our PowerPoint, and then we'll have that checklist that you can start working on some of these documents and getting them together today or between now and our next meeting. And that will all be on our website on utahprevention.org. And then you can click on the DFC training tab to access all of that information. So thank you. We know that was a lot of information we threw at you. If you have any questions, we're going to stay on the line, so feel free to ask us questions and we'll clarify anything that may not have been very clear. Otherwise, get to work on all of these things that we've been talking about and contact us if you have questions about it, and then we'll meet again on December 15th. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. But again, we're going to stick on the line. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them out right now. All right, I guess we answered them, Rob.
Hey, cool. The link for the task checkoff is actually, I posted it in the comments. It's going to be a Google Doc or a Google Sheets, and you can use it as a template. But we will be adding more things to it and adding dates as we continue on in our webinar series.
Awesome.
Okay, well, thank you.